The first white man to come through this way, of course, was John Turnbull Thompson, who came through in 1857. He was the first surveyor of Otago and later became Surveyor General of New Zealand. And his first job, of course, was to lay out the town of Bluff, then followed Invercargill and then Oamaru. And of course, as many of you know, most of those towns are named after the Scottish and English rivers. Anyway, he was asked to the coast had been surveyed, but inland here hadn't been touched. So he came through and, of course, took the Ahuriri East Branch, and then he came through Long Slip. He saw the big slip in the hill, and he called that Long Slip, and today we've got Long Slip Station. And as he came through, he was reminded of Lindisfarne Castle, which is off the coast of Northumberland, and the shape of the hill. So he called it Lindis. He saw this big mountain in the background, which he found, he called it the Matterhorn of the South, but in his diary or his map, he named it Aspiring. So that's how Aspiring got its name, and then he named Black Peak. Further round, he saw the Cadrona River, he named Cadrona. He named Luggett after the Luggett Creek. All these names came from mountains or rivers. And then he looked south and saw this big leaning rock on the mountain, and he called that Pisa. It reminded him of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Further round, he came, and of course, Tarras was named after Tarras Waters in just out of Langholm. And it was very interesting that two people were here this morning, they may be here in the audience, were from Tarras in Scotland. And it really got its name from the creek that flowed from Lindis Peaks up here, down through Melbourne Downs, down in front of the Tarras store, and on through Maryland, Tomich, and into the Lindis River. And further round, he came and he named the Cluden Creek, and that's how Cluden got its name. He named other areas. He saw the Mount St. Bathans, and his mother had been born at the Abbey of St. Bathans, so he called that the St. Bathans Range. However, the next year, the McLeans, who had come out from Scotland, they had property in out of Christchurch and Ashburton, and John McLean had been told by a Maori shearer that there was a large tract of land inland, and so he came through and he did the same thing. He looked at this and he thought this would be lovely sheep country. He hurried back to the Waste Lands Board in Christchurch, only to find it had been divided into 4 blocks. But being the wily Scotch that he was, he had his 2 brothers, Robertson and Alan, and his sister Alexandrina, each put in for a block. And so they named it Morven Hills after their... they had come from the Isle of Cole, but when you look across at Argyll, you have the Morven Hills. And then, of course, the outstation, or the lower station, was, they called it Ardgour, which is also in the same area. Of course, the big thing then was to stock these places, and it must be said that the Macleans had the best. When you think of this country, it would be pristine country. There would be no rabbits. There were no trees. Matagari was the only thing. There was no briar. There was no herocium. So they really had the best of it, and they were only in it 14 years, and they sold out to a Colonel Whitmore, and he was an army officer from Hawke's Bay. He no sooner, I don't think he even saw the place, and then he in turn sold it to a fella Cogle, who owned Lauder Station just over the hill here, which boundaries Cluden. And then came Dalgetty's in 1874. And Dalgetty's, of course, in that stage, it was stock firms owned most of these big high country runs. From there, they must have had a lot of shepherds to look after this country because there were no fences. And I have got a cutting here that I'd like just to read to you of the stock losses that occurred. They had a big snow in 1895, another one in 1903, another one in 1905. But this, I'll have to get my glasses. This is a cutting that appeared in the Targa Witness in 1903. It says, an 8-horse wagon passed through Clyde last week, loaded to its utmost capacity with some 6 tons with skins collected from sheep which had succumbed on Morven Hill Station during the late severe snowstorm. The Dunstan Times understands that there are another 2 such loads ready to be taken away from the same station. And when the numbers of dead sheep, which are never discovered, are taken into consideration, the mortality on this station must be appalling. And I understand that they did lose something like 45,000 sheep at one stage, so just think of it. The 4 blocks that they took up amounted to 352,000 acres. Now, we know Molesworth is one of our biggest stations of New Zealand. Molesworth is half the size of the original Morven Hill Station. From there, I could go on, but I won't bore you too much. The first country to be taken off Morven Hills was the Hawea Hundreds, and all those places that we know around Hawea were taken from Morven Hills. Well, I should have mentioned, most of you know, the area they took over amounted from Mount Molina in the north, which is further on from Dalrachny, and the east boundary was the Clutha River. The southern boundary was this side of Clyde, and the east boundary was the Dunstan Range. So it's a big hunk of country. They had a succession of managers, which you can well imagine. I think one fella got the sack after one of the big snowstorms, and it wouldn't be any fault of his own. And of course, the last manager was R.K. Smith. And today we've got descendants of R.K. here in the front row, which is nice to have them here. He was a very far-sighted fellow and was responsible for a lot of the trees and pastures. They had an experimental station at Cloudy Peak in that area. And I think that's that's about as far as I can go, because I think Mike Float, he has written, or you have a pamphlet there of the 1910 subdivision. I'll just tell you a few little things about some of the characters. I first went to Morven Hills in 1946, although I used to go up there in the 30s and stay with my aunt, and around at shearing time. And one of the characters there, and June Pedersen knows him well, was Jimmy Cairns. And Jimmy, he, like all shearers' cooks, he got on the bash occasionally, and if you could keep him sober, he wasn't too bad. But I can still recall as a small boy, Jimmy was setting the table one morning, and he said, pepper Jimmy, salt Jimmy, salt Jimmy, jam it up your ass, Jimmy. Jimmy had a poor sense of direction, and he used to live in a camp opposite Geordie Hill, and he used to follow the fence line up. He used to get a bit lost. He would follow the fence line up, and he hung a skull of a merino ram on the fence, and he knew when he hit that, he could just go down the ridge to the station to get his supplies. Now, another old character, and I'm digressing, was Jack Shadrach, and some people called him John, some Jack, and most of them called him Shaddy. And in the days when RK started this irrigation scheme and the race was going through, the racemen used to go to Shaddy's store, and even in my time I can recall the boots along the edge. They were just hanging there, and one of the racemen in his you wouldn't call it a rucksack, it would be perhaps a sugar bag tied in one corner and the neck of the other, and this fellow was about to pay for his things, and Shaddy said to him, by the way, those boots are £5. Oh, hell, Jack, he said, there's only got £3.10 on them. And Shaddy said, £3.10 when you buy them, £5 when you steal them.